Relax and listen to the voice.
There was a very beautiful young woman who had always dreamed of being a model. After finishing college, she found work in the fashion industry, modeling clothes for style magazines. As her career progressed, she went on many photo shoots in a variety of exotic countries. On one of these photo shoots, she was paired with a very handsome male model. They were both very attracted to each other, and one night they kissed. Soon the beautiful and handsome pair began dating, and they gradually fell in love. After a few years, they decided to get married. At the wedding, everyone complimented them, telling them that they made a gorgeous couple. Some of the guests said that they were so good looking that their children would certainly be beautiful. Before too much time had passed, the wife was pregnant, and the happy couple looked forward to starting a family and spending a wonderful life together. However, when the baby was born, the couple were horrified. This was the ugliest baby anyone had ever seen. Even the doctors and nurses were speechless. They couldn't even bear to look at the baby. The mother and the father had to stop themselves from vomiting whenever they caught sight of the disturbing face of their infant son. As the years passed, the boy grew older and his face grew more and more ugly. His eyes bugged out, his nose was deformed, and the skin around his mouth seemed to be rotting. At the time that he was 3 years old, he was hideous, and his parents kept the little boy hidden in his bedroom. They never allowed him out of the house, and they refused to let their relatives, friends, and neighbors ever set eyes on him. The good-looking couple were ashamed that they had given birth to a child with such a repulsive and monstrous face. The strain of having such an ugly child took its toll on their marriage. The couple spent most of their time fighting and arguing. Trapped in the house every day with their hideous son, the wife began to lose her mind. Whenever she looked out the window, she would see other children playing gleefully together and was filled with resentment. Her deranged mind began to develop murderous intentions. One day, the father decided that spending so much time hidden indoors was not healthy for his wife and son. He suggested that they should go for a picnic at a nearby lake. That day, they drove out to the lake and they selected a nice spot by the edge of a cliff for the picnic. Their ugly son said that he needed to go use the toilet, and in response, the mother told him to go pee over the side of the cliff. When the boy was close to the edge, he pulled down his zipper, and suddenly his mother reached out and pushed him off of the cliff. The father was absolutely horrified, but then a strange look passed between the married couple. He seemed to understand what she had done. Without a word, the parents packed up their picnic basket and blanket and drove home. They had finally ridden themselves of the ugly boy. When their neighbors asked them about their son, they simply said that he had died after suffering from a long illness. 1 year later, the wife became pregnant again. Initially, the couple were worried that they would be cursed with another ugly son. However, their fears proved unfounded, because when the baby was born, they were delighted to discover that it was actually the beautiful baby girl. The child looked just like her parents. Unlike their first child, the parents loved and nurtured their little girl. They were so proud of her that they showed her off to their friends and neighbors, and this incarnation of the family spent many happy years together. Time passed on, and the little girl was almost 4 years old. She told her parents that she wanted to go on a boat ride for her birthday. On the day that she turned 4, the parents drove out to the nearby lake with their beloved daughter. The day was very sunny, and they rented a boat and they sailed out across the placid waters. They were in the middle of the lake when the girl said, "Mommy, I need to go pee." The mother helped the little girl to take off her panties, and after checking that no one was looking, she lifted her daughter up and held her over the edge of the boat so that she could empty her bladder. The little girl began to squirm and looked back at her mother and father and said, "Daddy, don't let Mommy drop me this time." A boy and his girlfriend were riding a motorcycle, speeding through the night. They both loved each other quite a lot. The girl said, "Slow down a little bit, honey. I'm scared." The boy then replied, "Don't worry. I won't let anything happen to you." To this, the girl said, "Please, it's so scary. I'm scared." In a reply, the boy said, "Tell me that you love me." And the girl smiled and said, "Fine, I love you. Can you slow down now?" And to that the boy said, "Give me a big hug, squeeze me tight, hold on tight." The girl then gave him a big hug and asked him again if he could please slow down. The boy did not slow down, but he then replied, "Can you take off my helmet and put it on? It's uncomfortable, and it's bothering me while I drive." The next day, there was a story in the newspaper. A motorcycle had crashed into a building because its brakes were broken. There were 2 people on the motorcycle, of which one died and the other had survived. The boy knew that the brakes were broken. He didn't want to let the girl know because he knew that the girl would have gotten scared. Instead, he got her to tell him that she loved him one last time. He got one last hug from her, and he put his helmet on her head so that she could live while he himself died. Have you ever been in love with your best friend? If the answer is yes, then maybe this is something that you will understand. There was a boy and a girl who had been friends for years. After a while, they began spending more and more time together, and their friendship grew more close and more intimate. Eventually, they confessed their feelings for each other, and they fell truly, deeply, madly in love. They would often talk for hours on the phone and sent text messages to each other all day long. Whenever they were together, everything seemed right within the world, and not a single sad thought could cross their minds. The girl would wake up in the morning and go to school just to see his smiling face. He would stay up late, waiting for her to call, and fall asleep listening to the sound of her voice. She would steal his notebook in class just so he had to put his arms around her to get it back. Every time he heard a love song on the radio, he would think of her with every single line. And then one day, the girl didn't show up for class. He tried to contact her, see what was wrong, but she never answered his text messages. He tried to call her, but she didn't answer the phone. The boy became very worried that something was wrong. That night he lay down in bed and he tried to sleep, but it was no use. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Just then, his phone started ringing. It was her. "Hey, honey." "Hey." "Well, I missed you at school today. Why weren't you there?" "I had to go to the doctor." "Oh, really? Why?" Nothing. Just some flu shots, that's all. Well, you didn't miss anything much, I guess. And then suddenly, the girl burst into tears. What's wrong? Why are you crying? It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. It matters to me. I want to know why my baby's crying. Can I ask you a question? Of course. Do you love me? You know that I do. How much do you love me? Well, I love you more than anything in this entire world. Would you do anything for me? Yes, babe. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you. Would you die for me? Yes. This is weird. Is something wrong? At this point, the girl started crying even harder. Really? Yes, really. I would do anything for you. Let me hear you say it. Say, you want me to tell you that I would die for you? Oh, okay. I would die for you. Now please, tell me what's wrong. For a moment, there was an awkward silence on the end of the line. Nothing. I have to go. Wait! I can't. I really have to go. Babe, please don't leave me hanging like this. I'm so sorry. So, I'm confused. I'll see you tomorrow at school? Maybe. Well, all right. Bye. Goodbye. The next day, when the boy turned up at school, the girl was nowhere to be found. The boy asked his friends if they had seen his girlfriend today. All of them replied that they had not seen her. She wasn't here yesterday either. She was acting all weird on the phone last night. One of his friends replied, Well, dude, you know how girls are sometimes. Oh, yeah, but not her. She's not like that. Well, I don't know what else to say, man. All right. Well, I gotta get to English class. I'll see you after school. Yeah, I gotta get to science. Later on. That night, the boy got another call from his girlfriend. Hey, why weren't you at school today? I had another appointment with the doctor. What's going on? Are you sick? I have to go. My mom's calling on the other line. That's fine. Go ahead and take the call. I'll wait. Well, it may take me a while. I'll just call you later. No, I want you to tell me what's wrong. Well, I don't think we should see each other anymore. What? What do you mean? Are you saying you want to break up? It's the best thing for us right now. Oh, please don't do this to me, babe. I love you so much. I don't want our relationship to be over. Neither do I. Well, then what's going on? What have I done wrong? It's not you. It's me. I can't believe that you're doing this to me. It's you, not me? What? I can't believe that you're doing this to me. I love you. Goodbye. For the next 3 weeks, the girl was absent from school. Whenever the boy tried to call her, she never answered his calls. One day, the boy was sitting alone in the cafeteria when his friend approached him. Hey, dude. Hey, what's up? Have you talked to your girlfriend lately? No. Oh, so you didn't hear? What do you mean, hear what? Oh man, I don't know if I should be the one to tell you. Dude, just tell me what's going on. She's in the hospital. What? Why? You should probably go see her. Okay. Well, thanks, I guess. After school, the boy rushed to the hospital. At the front desk, he asked the receptionist if his girlfriend was a patient there. Yeah, she's one of our patients. What's wrong with her? I'm sorry, sir. We can't give out confidential information about our patients. Where is she? She's in the isolation ward. Can I see her at least? I'm sorry, sir. That's not possible. The isolation ward is off limits to visitors. I'm sorry. I have to see her. You need to get out of my way. Wait. No, you can't go in there. The receptionist tried to block him, all the while telling him to stop and wait, and that he couldn't go in there. The boy pushed past the receptionist and ran down the hallway. Eventually, he came to the isolation ward. Behind a glass wall, he saw his girlfriend lying in bed. It struck his heart, and he felt like it was such a pitiful sight. She had tubes coming out of her nose and mouth. Surgeons were gathered around her bed, working on her. They were wearing protective clothing, and their faces were covered by masks. The boy banged on the glass and he shouted her name. The girl turned her head, and she had a look of shock on her face to see him standing there. He waved to her, but she didn't wave back. He felt heartbroken and disappointed. Then he looked closer, and he realized, to his horror, that she didn't have any arms or legs. Beating on the glass, he started to yell, "Oh my God! Are you okay?" He could very softly hear her say, "I didn't want you to see me like this." "What have they done to you?" "Don't look at me, please." "Babe, what happened? Talk to me." I just... "What? You just what?" "I have a flesh-eating disease." "What? What in the hell is that?" "The doctors call it necrotizing fasciitis. I'm on life support. This disease is eating me alive." At that, the boy burst into tears. "Oh my God, this can't be happening." "The doctor said I must have caught it when I fell into that sewage tank. They had to remove my arms and legs, but that didn't stop it from spreading. There's nothing more that they can do for me. They say that they're taking me off of life support in 1 hour." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to. Really, I did." "But why didn't you?" "I couldn't. I didn't want to hurt you." "Well, then why did you break up with me?" "This disease is contagious. I didn't want you to catch it." The boy, outraged, not thinking, and clouded by love and emotion, screamed, "I don't even care!" To that the girl replied, "I couldn't take the risk. I love you more than anything." "Oh, I don't even know what to do right now. I can't believe you're in there. I can't go on living without you." "Please, you have to. Don't be sad for me. Just remember this. I love you, and I'll always be there with you in your heart." At this, the boy fell to his knees, doubled over in physical and emotional pain. Hospital security guards swooped in, grabbed him up, and carried him away. Later on that night, the girl was taken off of life support and was pronounced dead. The next day, the boy didn't show up for school. His friends wondered where he was. Instead of going to school, he made his way to the local zoo. He bought a ticket and he walked towards the wild animal enclosures. He took out a bottle of ketchup and he poured it all over himself. Then he started rubbing it into his skin. After wiping a single tear from his cheek, he walked over to the tiger's cage and he found his way inside. The wild beasts were hungry, and within seconds they pounced on him and they began tearing him apart. His dying screams echoed around the zoo. With their razor-sharp teeth and their pointed claws, the tigers ripped into his flesh and started eating him alive. By the time the zookeepers managed to get into the cage and subdue the ravenous tigers, the feeding frenzy was over. There wasn't much left but a pile of clothes and some gnawed, bloody bones. After they had removed the body from the enclosure and the police had arrived, they found, in the pockets of his jeans, a crumpled note. That note read, "I told her that I would die for her." A teenage boy gave a challenge to his girlfriend to live a single day without him. No communications at all. He said that if she passed the test, he would love her forever. The girl agreed to the challenge. She didn't text or call him for the whole day. The next morning, she excitedly went to her boyfriend's house. The place was silent, and there were people gathered in the living room dressed in black. Tears began to fall from her eyes when she saw her boyfriend lying in a coffin. There was a note on the side that read, "You did it, baby. Now can you do it every day?" The story I want to tell you may be quite difficult to believe. It's up to you to decide whether or not it's true. I lived with my parents in a small town. I was their only daughter, and they doted on me. When I was 18 years old, they sent me to the city to attend university. That was where I met the young man who was to become my husband. I had never so much as kissed a boy before he swept me off my feet. He treated me like I was the most beautiful girl in the world. It wasn't long before we fell in love. By the time we finished university, we were already engaged. We got married, and I moved into the house he shared with his parents. Soon afterwards, I discovered that I was expecting a baby. It wasn't an ideal situation. We were young, and the money was very tight, and living with his parents was sometimes difficult and stressful. We wanted to get our own place, but we couldn't afford it. My husband worked hard, and sometimes a couple of days would go by when he did not come home. I was sad and I felt lonely more often than not. Once my son was born, I spent all my time changing diapers and feeding him. My son grew up quickly, and by the time he was 4 years old, we were still stuck in the same situation. I thought that my hair would soon turn gray from a nervous breakdown. What was needed was a change of scenery. And then one day, my husband came home from work and told me that he was getting a promotion. Now we could finally afford to rent an apartment of our own. Of course, I was very happy, but I knew it meant that I would see my husband even less. As time passed, we moved into a rented apartment in an old, dilapidated building. It wasn't our dream home, but at least it was better than living with his parents. While my husband was busy at work, I ran the household and I raised our son. While he was finally old enough to go to kindergarten, I stayed at home, cooking and cleaning and doing all of the chores of a normal housewife. There were 4 apartments on our floor, and the doors faced each other. I decided to try and make friends with the neighbors, so I went to the first door. I wanted to introduce myself, and tell them that we had just moved in and try to strike up a friendship with them. Just as I raised my fist to knock on it, the door suddenly opened. I was a bit taken aback. The chain was on the door, and an old woman was peering through the gap, regarding me suspiciously. She looked like she must have been about 80 years old. "Hi, I'm new here," I said, but the old woman cut me off. "Get out of here," she hissed. "Nobody wants to make friends with you. Stay away from these apartments. What do you think you're doing here?" But, I stammered. "Go away, damn you," she hissed. "Leave everybody alone. They don't want to talk to you. If you don't get out of here, I'll call the police." And with that, she slammed the door shut in my face. I was so shocked. I was embarrassed and I was humiliated. I couldn't even think clearly. "Well, I hope you die, old lady," I muttered under my breath. When I turned to go home, I heard a soft female voice say, "Girl, I'm sorry." I looked up and I saw a young woman standing in the doorway of the apartment next door. "You must be our new neighbor," she said. "Well, yes, I am," I replied. "Well, I heard what the old woman said to you," she told me. I just smiled and said, "Yeah, what an unpleasant old woman. Nothing but a crazy old hag." "Well, don't let her get you down," the young woman said. "Would you like to come in and have a cup of tea?" I was grateful for that, and I immediately accepted her invitation. After that, we became good friends. Her name was Olga, and she said her husband had left her a long time ago. She had a son who was around the same age as mine. We often visited each other's apartments, and our children played together while we chatted over a cup of tea. Her son rarely left the apartment. He was homeschooled, and he seemed to be always quiet and sickly. Olga didn't have a job, but her husband was not supporting her. She said that her family gave her money from time to time. One day my son got sick, and I couldn't send him to school. I asked Olga to look after him while I ran some errands, and she gladly accepted. I took him to her apartment, and then I went down to the pharmacy to buy some medicine and picked up some groceries. When I came back home, I put the grocery bags in my apartment, and then I went over to Olga's apartment. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. I knocked out again, and I called out Olga's name, but to no avail. There was nobody home. I began to get nervous. My brain began swimming with questions. What happened? Where did they go? Where's my son? I just stood there at the door with a stunned look on my face. I didn't know what to do. I walked down the hall and I knocked on the door of the crazy old woman. In my panic, I forgot about all the horrible things that she had said to me. I just wanted to find my son. Perhaps the old hag saw Olga leaving with the children. At first, no one opened the door. When I began pounding harder and shouting, I heard the lock click, and the door opened just a crack. "I told you to get out of here," she said, but her voice was no longer angry. "I'm sorry. I need to find my son," I said. "Have you seen him? I left him with your neighbor, Olga. Have you seen her? Can you tell me what's going on?" I was so confused I felt like I was going to cry. "You poor stupid girl," the old woman said, shaking her head. It didn't sound like an accusation. It sounded like a death sentence. I thought that she must know something, and my eyes filled with tears. The old woman then opened her door and gestured for me to come inside. "Close the door behind you," the old woman hissed. I turned to close it, and when I did, I saw that there was a huge cross drawn in chalk on the inside of the door. On the upper edge of the door, there was also a box filled with needles and pins. "Come on, follow me," the old woman said. Her apartment was very neat and tidy. There wasn't a thing out of place. Glancing at the wall, I saw that it was covered in crucifixes. Large, small, bronze, gold. There must have been about 100 of them. In the corner, there was a small shrine with a statue of the Virgin Mary and a picture of Jesus holding his bleeding heart in his hand. This old woman must be very religious, I thought. "Do you know where my son is?" I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. "Yes, my child," she repeated sadly. "I'm afraid I do know." "What does that mean? What does that mean?" I demanded angrily. "Listen to me," the old woman snapped. "You probably think I'm some crazy old hag who has lost her mind, but that's simply not the case. When I yelled at you, I did it for a reason. I wanted to discourage you from coming to my apartment, and also to her apartment. If I had told you what I know, God forgive me, you would have never believed me. You young people, you all cease to believe. You don't listen to the advice we old people give you. You dismiss it as superstitious old person nonsense." "What are you talking about?" I interrupted. "The truth is," the old woman continued, "we live next door to the offspring of the devil. Every night I hear her moaning there behind that wall." The old woman raised her hand and pointed to the wall that was covered with crucifixes. I felt like I was in the middle of some kind of bad dream. "Where is my son?" I cried. "The same Olga who you saw lived here 2 years ago," the old woman continued. "What do you mean, lived?" I asked, somewhat surprised. "It means what it means," she snapped. "I saw it myself, with my own 2 eyes, her body and the body of her son being carried down this very hall. 2 years ago it was." But, I stammered. I felt faint and I sat down on the chair, feeling like my strength was about to give way. "When Olga's husband left," the old woman continued, "she couldn't come to terms with it. She grieved very much. She could not survive the breakup. She stayed alone with her son in the apartment. Her family was not poor, and they helped her out with money. They supported her in every way, but it wasn't enough. She began to neglect her duties as a mother. Sometimes she even forgot to pick her son up from school. Her son looked very much like his father, and every time she looked into her son's face, she saw the face of her husband, the man that she had grown to hate, the man that she blamed for her misery. And in her madness, she began to despise her own son. She didn't go to work. She didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She turned to drink and drugs to fill the emptiness inside. She receded from life, and she became like the living dead, just barely existing. Fortunately, her family decided to intervene. They saw that she was an unfit mother, and they decided that living with her was not a good thing for the little boy. They tried to get custody of the child, of course, but Olga refused to allow it, and she often flew into a rage. Eventually, her family decided that they would have to have her committed. They signed all the necessary paperwork to have her put into a mental hospital. Then the child would go to live with them. They thought that that would be the best for everybody, but things did not turn out the way that they had planned. One day, on the day that she was supposed to be taken to the mental hospital, Olga shut herself in the apartment with her son and refused to come out. She got drunk again, and she strangled her own child to death. And then she wrapped a belt around her neck, and she hung herself. Her parents found the bodies a few hours later, and I watched them carry out the corpses, and I attended their funeral a few days after that. The mother and the child were buried together in the same grave. You see, their bodies might have been taken away, but their spirits stayed in this apartment. Because of the way that they died, their souls can find no rest. At night, I hear them moaning and scratching at the wall. The apartment was put on the market, but so far, no one has been brave enough to buy it. Even the stench inside is said to be awful, and nothing can get rid of it. I told Olga's father at the funeral that the apartment was impure, that it needed to be exorcised. There ought to have been prayers read and holy water sprinkled around to sanctify it, but he told me, of course, he did not believe in such superstition, just the same as all of you young people do not seem to believe, and that is where your son is. With that, the old woman fell silent. "But I know Olga," I said. "We're friends. We've been friends for such a long time. We visit each other's apartments. Our sons play together." The old woman just stared at me, her hand shaking. "The first time I ever saw your face was only yesterday," she whispered. "Do you understand?" I sat there with my mouth open and my eyes full of tears. What could I say? I couldn't believe what the old woman was telling me. I ran out into the hallway and began banging on Olga's door. I kept banging and banging, trying to break it down, but it was no use. I gave up, and then I fell to my knees and I started sobbing uncontrollably. The old woman called the police. They came and broke down the door to Olga's apartment. Everything inside was covered in a thick layer of dust, and the smell of rot and decay was unbearable. They found the body of my little boy lying on the floor. He had been strangled to death. When I saw them carrying my son's body out of the apartment, I became hysterical. After that, everything was a blur. I remember the police questioning me, and I remember screaming and crying. I remember my husband shouting and shaking me by the shoulders, and I remember collapsing on the floor before everything went black. I was put into a mental hospital for examination. They kept me there for almost a year. By the time that I was released, my husband had left me. He never said it, but I think that he suspected that I had killed our son. He divorced me, and I was forced to move back in with my parents. Sometimes when I sleep, I see my son in my dreams. I see him running towards me and shouting, "Mama, Mama, they're keeping me here, and they won't let me go." Suppose you were sitting with me on the stairs of the terrace of your home at midnight, and suddenly your phone rang. You stand up and you go, promising that you'll come straight back. But when you go inside, the person on the phone is my mom, calling to give you the sad news that I had died last night. Would you still come back to me? The girl was pretty and she knew it. She could get any guy that she wanted. The boy knew that he didn't stand a chance with her, but he never gave up. Every night the girl would meet a new guy. Sometimes they would call her back. Sometimes they wouldn't bother. Every night the girl would cry herself to sleep. She hated her life. She hated being used by guys. She wanted to meet a genuine guy, a guy with a true heart who would really love her. The boy knew exactly what she was going through. He could see through all of her fake smiles, but he never had the courage to speak up and to tell her how he felt. As time went by, the girl became more and more depressed. Even the fake smile on her face began to fade. All of her friends deserted her. They began to spread vile rumors about her. Her heart was broken, and her past was beginning to catch up with her. One day, the boy finally managed to work up the courage to tell her how he really felt about her. He wanted to take her away from the life that she was living and show her what true love was like. He wanted to treat her the way a girl should be treated, with kindness and respect. The boy made his way to her house. With every step, he rehearsed what he was going to say to her. He was so nervous. He was absolutely dreading what would happen if she turned him down. He hated rejection. He couldn't stand the embarrassment. He waited at the bottom of her driveway, unsure of what to do. And then he saw a middle-aged man come out of the front door. As the man walked past, he asked the boy if he was next. The boy didn't understand, and he slowly approached the front door. It was open, so he went inside. He saw arrows on the wall, pointing towards the lounge. He saw a letter lying on the couch, and it read, "Dear Mom, I have finally made enough money to help you pay off all of our debts. I hope this will make you happy. Mom, I've been thinking about something for a while now. I've ruined my life and I just can't take it anymore. My whole life, all I've given you is sorrow. It would be better if I was gone from this world. You're better off without me. I know you will probably be too wasted on drugs and alcohol to understand what I'm saying. But Mom, despite everything that has happened, I want you to know that I always loved you. What I'm about to do is nobody's fault but mine. My whole life, all I wanted was true love. Mom, I guess it was never meant to be. Bye, Mom. I love you." The boy dropped the letter and began desperately looking for the girl. He was worried he might be too late to stop her. Just then, he heard the garage door close. He ran into the garage, and he found the girl sitting there on a chair. She was holding a knife. He walked up to her and he knelt down beside her. She looked at him and she started to cry. Tears of shame flowed down her cheeks. "All I ever wanted was true love," she wailed. The boy didn't say anything. He just put his arms around her. He hugged her and he held her close. He stayed with her there all night and he kept her company. He told her he would never let her go, and for the first time in her life, she felt loved. Then suddenly, the boy couldn't breathe. He began gasping for air. The girl asked what was wrong, and he realized that he had forgotten his inhaler. He was suffocating right before her eyes. The girl didn't know what to do. She wanted to run and get help, but she didn't want to leave him alone, not even for a second. The boy didn't want her to leave his side either. He had finally found true love, and now he couldn't bear to let it go. Finally, the girl got up and tried to go for help, but the boy refused to allow her to leave. He told her that he wanted her to hold him. He said he just wanted to stay in her arms. She sat next to him and held him tight. She kissed him on the cheek. "You showed me what true love is," she said. "You can't leave without me." The boy looked up at her with tears flowing down his face, and then his eyes fluttered and his eyes closed. They didn't open again. The girl got up and searched the garage, opening cupboards and looking under tables, and then all of a sudden, something caught her eye. It was her mother's shotgun. She lay down beside the boy and covered them both in a warm blanket. Looking up at the ceiling, she put the barrel of the shotgun in her mouth and she started counting backwards. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. All that the girl had ever wanted was to feel true love, and now that she had found it, she didn't want to let it go. 5, 4, 3, 2. She pulled the trigger. There was a deafening boom, and her life left her there in the garage. 2 young people died that night. They were killed by love. Don't let this happen to you. Tell that special someone how you feel. Tell them how important they are to you before it is too late. Boy brought 12 roses for his girlfriend. He gave them to her and said, "I will stop loving you when the last rose dies." The girl put the flowers in a vase. As the days went on, the roses began to wilt and die, one by one. Finally, there was only one rose left. The girl was worried. "Oh my God," she said. "When the last rose dies, my boyfriend's gonna stop loving me." And then she began to cry. Shortly after that, she took a closer look at the last remaining rose. She noticed that it was made of plastic. One day, a teenage girl wanted to call her boyfriend. There was something that she needed to tell him, but she was far too nervous. They had been dating for a year, and it was the first anniversary of the day that they had met. Picking up her phone, she dialed his number with shaking fingers and waited for him to pick up. It seemed to take forever for him to answer the phone. When he finally did, she said, "Hi." The boy said, "Why are you calling me?" "Well, I wanted to tell you something." "Oh yeah? What?" "Well, I love you." "Well, yeah, I know." "Really?" "Yeah, every one of my female friends tells me that every day." "But I thought I was your only female friend." "No, you're my girlfriend, but I have other female friends. Why, what's up?" "But when I say that I love you, I really mean it. I love you." "Well, yeah, I know what you mean. It's just that you don't need to tell me that you love me anymore because I already know it." "Well, do you love me?" "Well, yeah, I guess." "Well, that's good, because there's something else I have to tell you." "All right, what is it? Spit it out." The girl then told the boy that she was pregnant. He seemed to be confused and he couldn't understand what she was telling him. "Oh, I mean, I have a bun in the oven. I'm knocked up." "Really? Are you? Are you sure?" "Yes, I'm sure. The test was positive. I'm pregnant." The boy just sat there in disbelief. The only thing that he could say was, "Oh, boy." After a short time, the girl prodded with another question, and she asked him if there was something that he needed to ask her. To that, the boy replied, "Well, yeah, is it mine?" "Of course it's yours." And the girl quickly and confidently assured him that the baby was indeed his. She then asked, "So do you still want to see me tonight?" The boy said, "Tonight? Oh, yeah, I guess we should meet up." The girl replied, "Well, where were you thinking? Maybe we can go somewhere nice because, I hope that you remember that it's our anniversary." The boy then told her that he would pick her up after he got off work, and he advised her to make sure that she was ready because he would be tired and he didn't want to wait around too long. He told her that he got off in around 2 hours and that he would have to go home and change clothes, and that would take him about 15 or 20 minutes. They agreed to this plan and the boy told her goodbye. She then told him goodbye, but tried to hang on the phone just a moment longer. Oh, babe," she said. "Yeah," said the boy. "I love you." The boy then replied, "I know. Okay, well, my manager's looking at me, so I gotta go." 2 hours later, the boy drove to his girlfriend's house. He parked his car in the driveway and walked up to the door and rang the doorbell. When the girl opened the door, she was overjoyed to see him. She excitedly embraced him and kissed him on the cheek. The boy asked her if she was ready. He seemed irritated, and he admonished her to hurry up. That evening, they watched a movie at the local theater, and they went for dinner at a fast food restaurant. Once they had finished eating their French fries, they headed back to the car. At this point, the boy said, "Hey, wait a second. I have a surprise for you. But first I need you to wear this blindfold." The girl was taken aback and asked why. The boy then said, "Well, if you peek, it'll ruin the surprise." "What kind of surprise?" said the girl. "A really big one, I promise." She allowed him to place the blindfold over her eyes, and he tied it tightly behind her head. And then, after making sure she couldn't see a thing, he drove off into the night. The girl had no idea where they were going, but because her boyfriend was holding her hand, she felt safe. After driving for about 15 minutes, they finally came to a stop. "Okay, we're here," said the boy. "Here where?" said the girl. Wait, don't take the blindfold off. Let me walk you to the place." The boy took her arm and guided her down a narrow path. She could hear the gravel crunching beneath their feet, and the wind was blowing through her hair. It was very cold, but because her boyfriend was holding her arm, she felt safe. "Okay, we're here. Let me take off that blindfold." He removed the blindfold and she opened her eyes. They were standing on a cliff overlooking the city. The view was simply beautiful. She believed that she was in the exact spot that she had been standing when he first asked her to be his girlfriend. The girl was overcome by so much emotion, she burst into tears. "Why are you crying?" said the boy. "Because I can't believe you remembered. This is the spot where you first asked me out." The boy stared directly at her and then looked down at his watch. "Well, it's about time," he said. "About time for what?" asked the girl. Just then in the distance, she heard the pop, pop, pop sounds of fireworks going off. As she watched breathlessly, they spread out across the moonlit sky and spelled out her name in lights. Tears began streaming down her cheeks. "I thought you forgot about our anniversary," said the girl. "Well, I wasn't at work when you called me," said the boy. "I was planning this whole thing." "I can't believe you planned all of this for me. It's beautiful," exclaimed the girl. "Well, I've just got one more surprise for you," said the boy. "Can you guess what it is?" The girl became nervous and excited at the same time. "What is it?" she asked. "Are you going to ask me to marry you?" "Not exactly," said the boy. "Look down the cliff and tell me what you see." The girl carefully took a couple of steps closer to the edge of the cliff. "I don't see anything, just a lot of big rocks and bushes." "Well, that's right," said the boy. And as she was looking over the edge, distracted, the boy suddenly pushed her from behind. The girl lost her balance and toppled over the edge of the cliff. She fell to her death. The boy peered over the edge and watched as her broken body was tossed by the waves and dashed to pieces on the rocks below. A girl asked the boy if she was pretty. He said no. She asked him if he wanted to be with her forever. He once again said no. She then asked him if he would cry if she walked away. He shook his head and said no. The girl had heard too much. She needed to leave. As she walked away, he grabbed her arm and he asked her to stay. He said, "You're not pretty. You're beautiful. I don't want to be with you forever. I need to be with you forever. I wouldn't cry if you walked away. I would die if you walked away." My stepfather always hated me. When my mother married him and he moved into our house, my life became a living hell. He found fault with every little thing that I did, and he was constantly shouting at me and calling me names. In his eyes, I could never do anything right. Pretty soon, all of the chaos at home began to affect my schoolwork. I found it impossible to study, and my grades started slipping. At the dinner table, I was so nervous that I hardly ate a thing. I gradually withdrew into myself, and I stopped hanging around with my friends. Things began to grow worse and worse. I became my stepfather's punching bag. He started beating me at the slightest excuse. He was a strong man, and I was too small to fight him off. Each punch and kick that he delivered hurt me emotionally as well as physically. It wasn't long before I was diagnosed with depression, and the doctors put me on medication. Through all of this, my mother stood by and refused to intervene. She chose her new husband over me. That hurt me more than anything else. I gave up hope, and I prayed for the day when I could escape. One day, I couldn't take it anymore, and I ran away from home. I made it as far as the city, when the police found me and brought me back home. When they took me back to my house, my stepfather was standing at the door waiting for me. His face was twisted up in a sneer of anger and rage. As soon as the police left, he turned to me and he said, "Did you think that you could escape?" That night, he beat me twice as bad as ever before. I cried myself to sleep. After that, the violence escalated. Every evening when he came home from work, I tried to avoid him, but it was no use. He began inventing excuses to beat me. I never understood how anyone could be so mean and cruel. It seemed like it was all a big game to him. Each time he hit me, I could see how much he was enjoying it. At this point, my body was covered in bruises and it hurt to breathe. Eventually, he went too far. One evening, he beat me so badly that I couldn't move. I just lay on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the ceiling. I didn't know it at the time, but I was bleeding internally. My mother begged him to bring me to the hospital, but he just ignored her. He said I was faking it. During that night, I lay on the floor of my bedroom, moaning in pain and slowly slipping into unconsciousness. The next morning, my mother came in to check on me, but by then, I was already dead. I don't know how much time passed. Suddenly, I saw a bright light. I heard a voice announce, "It's a healthy baby boy." I started crying loudly. Slowly, ever so slowly, I opened my eyes. A man and a woman were staring at me, and they were smiling from ear to ear. The man leaned down and he touched my cheek, and in a soft, gentle voice he said, "Did you think that you could escape?" There was a girl named Becca and a boy named Joe. Becca was in a burning house. None of the firefighters could get into the house because the fire was too big. Joe dressed up in one of the firemen's suits and got into the house. When he got up the stairs, the steps fell off behind him. When he got into her bedroom, he sealed the door up behind him. He held her tight, he kissed her, he hugged her, and he told her that he loved her. She asked what was wrong, and he said that he was going to die. Her eyes widened as she began to cry. He picked her up, and he jumped out of the window of the 4-story house. He landed on his back, and she landed on top of him. He broke her fall. He was killed, but she survived. He died to save her life. One day, a woman named Kate was just about to start cooking dinner when her son arrived home from school. "How was your day, dear?" she asked. Awful," the boy groaned. "I've got a splitting headache. We were playing soccer, and one of the other boys accidentally kicked me in the head." "Oh my goodness, that's terrible, dear," his mother said. "Do you want to put some ice on it?" "No, that's okay," the boy replied. "I'm really tired. I think I'll just go upstairs and take a nap." "Okay, well, dinner will be ready in an hour," she said. "Don't forget." A few minutes later, the phone started ringing. Checking the caller ID, she realized that the call was coming from a private number. "Hello, Sheffield residence," she said. "Kate speaking." She could hear crying on the other end of the line. It sounded like it was a female voice. "Hello, who's this?" asked Kate. "Please, please, please take," said the female voice on the other end, and then all of a sudden, the line went dead. The voice sounded very familiar. She was convinced it was someone she knew very well. It sounded like someone in her family. She just couldn't quite put her finger on who it was. She immediately dialed her mother. "Mom, did you just call me crying?" she asked. "No, of course not, dear," her mother said. And then she called her sister. "Mary, did you just call me crying a minute ago?" "No, it wasn't me," her sister replied. Kate spent the rest of the night trying to figure out who it was that had called her. She was so perplexed by the anonymous call that she completely forgot about cooking dinner. She was convinced that she recognized the voice. She called every one of her family members and every one of her friends, but they all denied calling her earlier that day. When she went to bed that night, she was still thinking about it. "Well, maybe it was just the wrong number," said her husband. "No, that's just the problem," Kate replied. "If it was a wrong number, I could just forget about it. But it was the right number. I'm sure of it." The next morning, she found her son dead in his bed. He had died from a brain hemorrhage. The kick that he received during soccer practice caused internal bleeding on his brain, and during the night, he had lapsed into a coma and passed away. The woman and her husband were absolutely devastated. Neither of them could get over the loss of their beloved son. As time went on, they grew apart, and eventually they divorced. They packed up their belongings, sold their house, and went their separate ways. 5 years later, Kate was sitting alone in her new house, watching TV, when she started thinking about her son. Somehow, she had forgotten that it was the anniversary of his death. She couldn't believe he had been gone 5 whole years. And then all of a sudden, something struck her. She leapt out of her chair, rushed into the hallway, and she grabbed the phone. She dialed the number of her old house and listened to it ring and ring. Then someone answered the phone, and she heard a familiar voice on the other end. "Hello, Sheffield residence. Kate speaking." She stood there dumbfounded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was so shocked that she could barely speak. "Hello, who is this?" said a voice on the other end. Kate took a deep breath. "Please, please, please take..." And just then, the line went dead. "Please take him to the hospital," she screamed. She tried the number again and again, but all she got was a recorded message saying that the line was no longer in service. A girl was standing behind the counter at the gas station where she worked. She looked up and she saw her boyfriend walk in. As he was looking at snacks, a man walked in and pointed a gun at her. He had been admiring her ring her boyfriend had given to her as a token of his love. When the man told her to give it to him, she said no. Her boyfriend looked up just in time to see the man pull the trigger and watch her head snap back. Her boyfriend ran over to the killer and beat him over the head with a hammer that was for sale and which he picked up in one of the aisles. Then he ran and called 911. When the ambulance came, he was kneeling over his girlfriend, sobbing uncontrollably. The paramedic came over and felt for her pulse, and then he frantically stood up and said that she was still alive. Later on, her boyfriend came to the hospital to see her. As he was sitting at her bedside, he asked, "Why didn't you just give him the ring?" And then she softly spoke. "Because when you gave it to me, you said it was a part of your love for me, and I knew if I gave him the ring, I would lose a part of that love." It seemed like this must have been her final message to her boyfriend, because the next morning, the young woman was pronounced dead. Wow, such tragedy. Love is hard, but love is important. We hope that you like these tales of tragic love stories. Take care of yourselves until the next time. Sweet dreams.